All right. So for review this morning, what I wanted to do was I wanted to make yet another uh, Angular app and just sort of walk through it. Sorry, dude. But wait, you're nodding and shaking. I don't know what. Yeah.
We did it yesterday, and we kind of got to the point, just the state point. Can we go past that to like directives and shit?
Yeah. No, I mean, getting to that point should go pretty quick. Yeah. Uh, Cool. So this one is, I'm actually a little bit nervous because I just literally just made this, and I don't have a README for it or anything. I'm going to be going off of this series of commits I made, which I think is pretty good, but we'll find out. Lucky you. So this is an app called Shangri-Angula, which is like a pun on Shangri-La, and the idea is it's like a travel destination app. It's totally different from Grumbler and everything else we've made. It is absolutely not the exact same thing with a different name on it. All right, so I'm going to start off with this thing. And I'm going to be like cranking through this thing. So this is one of the things where I would ask you to like not code along because, yes, but I'm going to hide it from you personally. No. Okay. Yeah, because I'm going to be like blowing through this thing. All right, so git clone. Angular. All right, cool. So where we begin is with this. So you can already get an idea that I'm going to try to turn this into a Rails app. I'm just going to go commit by commit through this guy. But first I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to get to the end of setting up all the Rails code because you guys are all expert Rails developers now, so you don't need to go through that part. All right, so what we have here is basically what you had with inventory tracker yesterday. So I've got like this destinations.js, doesn't have anything in it yet, but it will. This is where I'm going to put all my Angular stuff. Really the only thing that's working on here is the roots. So I do have the JSON roots set up, but there's no Angular in this yet. So I have an API set up, but there's nothing consuming it. So let's see. I'm going to go through these motions. I've got some seed data in here. I was pretty proud of Ragnarok and Roll All Night. I thought that was fun. It's going to be one of those days. All right, so there's that, and now I should be able to fire up this guy and just see some data hanging out. Oh, for Christ's sake. Okay, not a problem. I know exactly what to do. I'm going to go into this thing. I keep on running into this error. I have no idea why. What is this thing supposed to look like again? I'll just look at this. And we'll copy these guys. Cool. Yay! Okay, so this has just one model in it, which is destinations. And when I go to the index page, I get this. So I got Bootstrap in here, I've got Angular in here, but obviously nothing's happening. I also have all of the JSON roots. So here are all of my different destinations right here. So this is what I'm starting with. I have an API, but nothing is consuming that API. I have a whole bunch of JSON, but nothing's doing anything with that JSON. So I haven't started to do Angular stuff yet. I've just been getting Rails set up to make an API. All right, let's see. So now I'm going to start putting the Angular stuff in. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some roots. So you guys have done this all in separate files, I'm going to do this just all my JavaScript in one file. I could do it in separate files, but I don't want to scroll around so much. I just want to have everything all on one page. So that's what I'm going to do. The very first thing I need to do is I need to define an Angular module. That's going to be my app. And I'm going to call it Shangri-Angular. And I know down the road I'm going to want UI router and ng resource. Okay, so that's my model set up. Now I'm going to give it some roots. And so to do that, I need state provider, and then I need some sort of a function. I'll just call it router function. Okay, so now I'm going to put some stuff inside that router function. State provider, blah, 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 state provider, and I'm going to define two different states. I'm just going to start off with index and show for right now. I'm not even going to worry about controllers yet. Okay, cool. So these guys need some templates. So the place I'm going to put the templates, there are several places you could put them, but the easiest one, just because I don't want to worry about it, is inside the public folder. So I'm just going to put all my templates in here, just to keep things simple for now. To keep them organized, I don't have to do this, but to keep them organized, I'm going to put them in an ngViews folder. It doesn't have to be called ngViews. It's just reminding me that, hey, Angular views. All right, so I know that I'm going to need two different templates, one for index and one for show. I can name these however I want, but I'm going to call this one destinations index.html, and I'm also going to do destinations.show.html. I like writing things this way because it sort of keeps them alphabetized in a way that I like over here. All right. So now let me just get this thing working. Just want to make sure I can get that to show up. I need to reference my template URL over here. Because it's in the public folder, I don't need to write public slash. I can just write ngViews. I can just jump straight in here and then go to the name of the file. Destinations index HTML. Okay. What? So the thing about the public folder is everything in public, you can access it just by going to localhost 3000 / whatever its file name is. So if you have whatever.html inside your public folder, you can access it just by going to localhost 3000 / whatever.html. All right, cool. So there's that. It's still running. 3000. Prada. No, not doing that. Destinations. There we go. Okay, so I've sort of set up Angular, but I haven't told it to actually start running yet. To do that, I'm going to need to go into this main view I have for this guy, and I'm going to need to do ng app and everything. So I'm going to do data ng app Shangri-Angular. Let me make sure I spelled that right. Not getting errors, so that seems okay. Let's see, what else do I need to do here? Change the CSS a little bit. So because I'm doing UI router, I need to do this data UI view thing in here. I'll come back to that in a second, actually. I'm going to leave that off for right now. I'm going to start off just making sure that, okay, so there's that. And now I think if I go to /, it should take me to the index page. And it doesn't. I don't get anything. So that's because I need this data UI view in here. This is sort of like yield in Rails. It's the equivalent of yield in Rails for Angular. So you need to have this in here if you're going to have different templates and you want them to show up. If you don't have it, it's like not having yield and nothing's going to show up in your app. And just to make things easy, I'm also going to make this guy a link to my index page. So my index page, it's in this state, just called index. So what I can do is put data UI sref and then the name of that state is index. So I'm going to put index right there. And just to make this look a little bit more like a link, I'm just going to put that guy in here. All right, and there we go. So now I'm getting some stuff showing up. I have this index template over here, and now that's happening on here. That's showing up.
In your URL,
Yes.
why do you have destination before the pound?
It's because you, so you know jump anchors, we've seen those before where it's like you put, I don't know, some section over here and it jumps to the thing with the ID of some section. Whenever you change whatever is after the pound, the browser does not reload the page. And we don't want the browser to reload the page here. So I'm staying after the pound sign because I'm going to be changing this URL around a lot. I'm going to be going to slash, I'm going to be going to /32, blah, blah, blah. Angular is going to register that, but the browser is not going to refresh the page. So this is a way of faking it. This is a way of making it look like I'm going to different URLs without actually going to different URLs.
Why do you have destination? Why not just /pound/?
Oh, okay. So that's because I'm at the Rails root the destinations index root in Rails. Right now, I'm looking at this thing right here. I'm right here. So if I were to change this to render plain Anissa, now it would just show me Anissa. So this is like the index.html on which all of my Angular is being run. So I have 2 more hands. Yep. Oh, hold up. Yep.
So what about the other line that we saw that was href equal
This thing? So I put that in there because I think if I don't have that, oh, it actually works just fine. Yeah, I don't need it. Sometimes if you don't have that in here, it like doesn't look like a link. It's not blue and underlined. That's the only reason I put it in there. Yeah, it's not an Angular thing. It's just a visual thing. And it turns out I don't even need it. All right?
Is there a way to set a home page for Angular so you don't have to always type in /destination?
Well, so what I'm doing here is, well, yeah, so here I do need /. I'm sure there is. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Actually, well, so what you would do is you would do something like, this is actually my main page, right here. And then that's going to show up regardless of what I'm on here. I'm just sort of, this is sort of like my layout.html.erb thing. So yeah, you can just sort of define it like this. There's probably some other way to like force a home page like that, but I'm not really sure what that is right now. Bless you. No?
So I guess your Rails pages are always the home page because you can set the roots to it. Like in your config, you do like routes, and your route can be, it's always going to be your Rails page. It can't be your Angular page.
Well, my Angular runs on Rails. So I'm not sure I understand. So we can come back to that later. How about that? All right, so what I've done so far is I've gotten a couple different views set up. So basically, I've done the same thing as if I did Rails new, and then I defined the routes, and then I put a couple of views in there. Not doing anything with data yet, but we'll get to that. So I have a couple different routes. Cool. So that's it for that commit. Now I'm going to go on to the next one. So this one is going to be setting up an index controller. So I don't want this to just say sup on here. I want to be able to transact data back and forth. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to create a controller. I'm going to call it, I don't know, what did I call it in here? I liked what I called it in here. Call it indexctrl. And then I need to define its function. Now I'm going to go down here. I'm going to do indexctrl function. Okay, so I'm going to leave this really simple for right now. I just want to make sure that this thing is working. So I'm just going to do like indexvm.foo equals bar. And I'm just going to make sure I can get bar to show up in my view. I'm not going to worry about data yet. I just want to make sure I've set up my controller properly. Baby steps. So the other thing I need to do is I need to tell this state which controller it's going to use. So I can write controller and then whatever it was, index CTRL. And then I'm going to do the controller as thing. So this is how I'm actually going to refer to that controller inside my view. I call it index VM down here, so just for consistency, I'll call it index VM up here as well. I think that's it. Hold that thought. I think that's it. Now I should be able to go in here and do indexvm.foo, and I'll have bar show up. So let's find out. There we go. So now my controller is working just fine. This is how this indexvm dot, this is how I'm going to be passing all of my data into my view. It's as if I was putting @foo here, like I would have in Rails. I'm not doing that, but it's the same concept. Instead of doing @, I'm going to do indexvm dot. Anissa, what was your question? All good? Sweet. I love it when I do that. All right, so that's the index controller. All right, cool. So now let's get to some actual data and doing stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to put in a factory. We didn't do this in inventory tracker. We didn't use a factory because you really only need a factory when you're going to be sharing data between different states. In inventory tracker, we just had one state. There was like an index view, and that's it. There weren't multiple views. If you want to share things between different views, then you need a factory. And so that's what we're going to be using here. The factory can communicate to all of those different views. Don't worry about why too much. Just take it as a given that if you want to communicate data between different views, you're going to need a factory. Or if you're a real Angular nerd, you can use a service as well. They're basically the same thing. But we're going to do a factory. So I'm going to, what I'm doing here is it's basically the same thing as me defining a model in Rails. That's basically what I'm doing here. A model is something that's accessible in like every view. What I'm making here is something that's accessible in every view, in every root, all of that stuff. So a factory is a lot like a Rails model. An Angular model is nothing like a Rails model, so that doesn't help things at all. I'm going to call, so let's see, in here, I'm going to do this with the whole ng resource thing. So I need $resource. And then I'm going to call this dest factory function for destination factory function. I could call it whatever I want. I'm just going to go with that. So now I'm going to scooch down here and define that function. And I injected one dependency, which is $resource, so I'll put that in here. Excuse me. Okay, cool. So that is pretty good. I also know that I'm going to want to use this destination factory in my index controller, so I'm going to inject it there as well. So this factory is called destination, so I'm going to put destination right here. That's going to let me reference destination in here. So I know that this is like not in the right order. It sort of looks like I'm defining destination down here and then trying to call it right here. Angular waits until everything has been set up before it starts trying to do stuff. So this order up here really doesn't matter. I could do this in any order I want and it would work just fine. Now as soon as I say that it's not going to work, we'll find out. Okay, so now I need to set up that resource and everything. So this is going to be the URL from which I want to get all of this stuff. Destination/id.json. There's this empty object in here. I don't remember what that does. And then this one where I'm going to do that thing where I have to define that update uses put. So there's that. Let me just start off with this. Okay, so again, I just want to make sure this is working, so I'm just going to do console.dir destination. I'm not even going to do dir. I'm just going to do console.log destination, and I will consider this to be successful if I don't get an error. Let's find out. Hey, I have no idea how to read this, but it's not an error, so I'm just going to assume that I'm doing the right thing. Okay, so now that I've done that, now I want to do some stuff with actual data. So I'm not going to use indexvm.foo anymore because that's stupid. I'm going to get all of these destinations. I'm going to say indexvm.destinations equals destination.query. I think that's all I need to do for that. I don't need that guy anymore. Now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to try to make all of those show up. Let's see, I had like a really pretty bootstrappy way of doing it. What was that? I think that's my next commit. Okay, div class row well. And now I'm going to do the Angular part. So anything I'm doing with classes in here is just bootstrap stuff to make it look pretty. So now I'm going to be repeating through indexvm.destinations. I'm going to repeat through each destination in indexvm.destinations. And I'm going to stop there and make sure that this is working. Hopefully, I'll see each destination's name. Fantastic. All right, so what am I doing wrong? Oh, you know what? It's because this has to be plural. That was a typo. Now, yes. Okay, so now I get these guys. So this is awesome because I know I am successfully set up with the data, and I know I can successfully make the data show up in the view. Pretty much everything after this point is just sort of icing on the cake. If I've gotten this far, I am pretty pleased with myself, just getting things to show up. Matt, do you have a question? Oh, okay. I thought this. Myron?
How do you put together your data in your data called destination? That was the name of it.
Yeah, this thing right here. Yeah, you guys called this like doing it the other way you would have done. You would have called this like destination factory or something. You can name it whatever you want. I'm calling it capital destination because it just sort of reminds me, hey, this is a lot like a Rails model. So just for my own comfort, I'm trying to like draw some connections here. So I don't.
That's how I pull it from your database. And put it in the files you have all the data. I don't see that part when you have all your data from your file. From like your DB file.
Oh,
Yeah.
like where is it all coming from?
It's the C file, but like what's pulling all that in there? I missed that part.
Because it's requesting all of the data from destinations.json.
Okay.
Yeah. So Angular automatically, this $sign resource thing, entity resource automatically figures out where it should be making requests to. Now I say automatically, like it expects standard RESTful routes. So it expects that destinations is going to give you an index page. It expects that destination/some ID is going to give you a show page. So it expects you to follow the standard conventions for RESTful routes. As long as you do that, entity resource basically takes care of everything else for you. So it figures out that /destinations.json is where I want to get all of the data for my destinations from. All right, I'm going to make this look a little bit less grody and fill in the rest of the information in here. Div class call md6 h3 a. Okay, and I know down the road I'm going to be wanting to make a link to each of these destinations URLs. So I'm going to do that now as well. So this state is called, I think, show. That's easy enough. So I'm just going to do data sref show. I'll come back to that later. Put the description here. Lots of bootstrappy stuff. Now I'll actually use Angular to get the images image URL. Not very imaginative. Okay, cool. So this should look better, I think. Yeah, there we go. So that looks pretty nice. Sweet pictures. Cool. And then that's about it. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that I can see that these links are going to go to the right place. So here, right now, it's just trying to take me to destination slash. That's because I haven't told it what ID I want it to use yet. So that's what I need to do next. I'm going to pass in ID is destination.id. And now I think when I hover over this, I should see, destination slash 1. If I scroll down, destination slash 2, blah, 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 destination slash 3. So that's how I'm getting that in there. I haven't done anything with those views yet, but I will. I'm going to get to that point. I really like these pictures. Fun fact. All right, so this is still pretty good. I've got my data showing up, and it looks pretty nice now. So I'm still feeling pretty good about this. And I will continue to feel pretty good about this. So now I'm not going to get to show yet. Now I'm going to make it so that I can create a new fucking thing. Destination. Someday I'll make an app with fucking thing as its model. I hope no one's offended by me swearing, but if it is, you're like 8 weeks too late. Yeah, right? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a form. And this is going to be with a custom directive. And I'm going to do this with a custom directive because I'm going to want to use the same form twice. I'm going to want to use it to create things and also to edit things. So that's why I'm using the same form twice. So I'm making a custom directive. I'm going to do .directive on here. I hope you can already sort of like start to get an idea of why we separate these things out into separate files because this is starting to get pretty long. And it's not going to get too bad in this class because there aren't too many things going on here. But after a while, it gets pretty gnarly. I'm going to call this destination form. And then it is just going to take that destination factory as a dependency. And I'll call this dest form function. Dest form function. Okay, cool. So I'm going to start off just making this thing show up. I'm not going to worry about doing any data with it yet. I'll start off with this, actually. This is working. Cool. I think that's all I need to do to be able to start using this. I'm going to put div. I'm going to call this custom directive now. So I called it destination form here. So I need to do destination form here. And I think I should see this is working. Yep, I already saw it. There it is. All right, so I have a custom directive working. It's not very exciting. I don't just want to write all of my HTML in here. I want to get it from a template somewhere else. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to do destinations form HTML. And I'm going to do baby steps. I'm just going to take this guy, put it in there. This is still working. And I'm going to make sure I can get that to show up. So now the path to this is going to be ngViews/destinations form HTML. Yep, this is still working. Cool. So one step forward, now my template is in a separate file. So let's make this look like an actual form. I'm going to say add your destination, and then I'm going to stop typing stuff in. I'm just going to copy this because it's all just a whole bunch of bootstrap. All right. Couple things to point out here. One is that I have to do data ng model. If I don't do that, this form isn't going to work. So I have to do ng model. I haven't set up this destination yet, but I will. I know that I'm going to be passing in some sort of a destination to this form, so I'm just putting that as a placeholder in here right now. I know each form is going to be doing something with the destination, so I'm just putting destination in here to remind myself. And then I'm going to have to define this destination create thing down here. So I'll get to that in the next step. Right now, I just want to make sure that this form is showing up. Yeah, there it is. Cool. Pretty. Oh, man, except it's... Ugh. Some padding on the bottom there. Oh, well, whatever. And I think that is going to be it for this one. Actually, no. That padding... Not having that padding is going to bother me, so I'm just going to put this in here. Give class all MD6. That looks better. And let's see. I think that's all I need to do here. So the next step is going to be making that form actually do something. All right. So the first thing I need to do is I need to have some sort of a destination that I'm working with here. So I'm going to do index VM new destination. So this is just creating, it's as if I was doing destination.new in Rails. It's just creating like a blank destination for me to work with. And then I'm going to pass that in to this guy, to this custom directive. I'm going to pass that in as an attribute. So I'm going to call it destination. And I know this is where things are going to start getting weird. No worries. So this is sort of the avenue through which I'm going to pass this new destination into my directive. It's coming from my controller, that's this guy, and then I'm passing it into this custom directive through here. And now the nice thing about doing that is I'm going to be able to access that in my directive down here. So I need to do this hokey thing with scope. I don't remember why, I just remember I need to do this. I do remember why, but I'm not going to go into it right now because whatever. Knowing why is not as important as knowing how. So I'm just going to look at my lesson plan and be like, oh shit, I need some sort of an equal sign there. All right, we'll see what happens. And then I'm going to console log scope.destination, and I'm just going to stop there and make sure that this is working. Hopefully, again, I get something that is not an error. All right, cool. I don't know what this is, but it's not an error, so I'm going to assume that things are working appropriately. If I look in here, I can see that it gets this like dot delete, or it gets delete, get, query. It gets all of these like resourceful methods here. So that's one advantage of using ng resource is that you get access to all of these things out of the box. It's like the advantage of using active record base is that you get access to .create, .new, .whatever out of the box. ng resource is Angular's active record base. All right, so this form doesn't actually do anything yet, but before I get to the form actually doing something, questions about this part? I know I'm going through this at lightning speed. All right.
ng resource, is that what you use to get like external APIs?
Mm-hmm.
So that also gives you the methods. So you have to use it. We're using different methods in this case.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sir.
Can you go back down closer to the bottom? No, that was not this side, sorry. Oh, no. I don't know what I was looking. Keep going.
Cool.
It was the part where you did like data, destination.
Oh, that you mean this guy right here.
Yeah.
So what's going on here is this is how I'm saying, hey, I want to use this custom directive. If I call this custom directive, guess what word I'm going to put in here? If I use wombat here, then I would put wombat here. This destination right here, that has to match this guy right here.
Oh, okay.
So if I called this Sarah, then this would be data Sarah.
Okay, I think I just got confused because it was a lot of destinations.
Yeah, I know. We're going to see like 8,000 destination things on here.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Grumbles.grumbles.grumbles. Yeah, Jeff.
I know it's interesting where you linked up in resource as a script tag. Is that in application layouts or is that in?
Oh, I did that in here. So this gets this this gets this destinations thing. Inside that, up at the very top, I'm using that Railsy way of including ng resource and UI router and all that stuff in here.
Requiring it, those are in the vendor folder?
Yep, exactly. So it's just like we did it yesterday with the inventory tracker thing. The only difference is we have one additional thing. We didn't use UI router yesterday, now we are. So that's in here too. All right. Oh.
Empty hash thing, the empty bracket, curly bracket. So it was in the middle of something.
Yeah, you're talking about this thing right here. I don't remember what that does, but I don't need to worry about it. As long as I don't get an error, I'm just going to assume I'm doing the right thing. Story of my life. Okay, so now I'm going to make this form actually do stuff. So I want it to create a directive. So I'm going to use a create. I'm just going to call this function create. Why not? That makes sense to me. Let's see. So baby steps, I'm going to make sure this is working. And I'm going to make sure that when I click on this button in the form, where are you, form? I'm going to make sure that when I click on this button, it does that method. So I should see this is working. And there it is. Matt?
How come you didn't put create main?
Because that's a Rails method. This is a JavaScript method. I'm not doing anything with Rails here. This is just, I can name this whatever I want. I mean, I can call this like, birth new destination or something. And then I just have to call it, then I just need to call it birth new destination in here. I mean, it smells like macaroni and cheese. What's up with that? Yeah, so this is not a Rails thing. This is an Angular thing. I'm calling it create just to sort of remind myself that, hey, this is going to create stuff. So I'm just trying to be semantic. But you are never going to see a JavaScript function that has an exclamation mark in it. In fact, you're probably never going to see a JavaScript function that has any punctuation in it at all. You can't, with the exception of like underscore or dash. You can do like question marks and at and exclamation marks and stuff in Ruby, but you can't do that in JavaScript. And over the course of this class, I'm not going to be writing a line of Ruby. I'm just writing JavaScript. Nara.
So for your forms, you have one for like your public folder, and you also have one for your destinations form HTML. Is there like a simpler way of doing that, or
No, I just have the one. I have this one template right here. This is my only form.
But then there's also one in the public folder.
Yeah, this is all in the public folder.
Oh, okay.
Yep. All right, so let's make this form do some stuff. When they submit the form, I want to create a new destination. And, oops, it's destination.save. I want to save this scope.destination thing. And then when it's done, well, let's just make sure it worked. It worked. So I'm not going to get any visual feedback that this actually worked, but that's okay. I'll get to that in the next step. So when I click this, hopefully I'll see it worked. I see it worked. And if I refresh this, I should see test 1 down here at the bottom. And there it is. So I know this is working. Now this kind of sucks because I have to refresh the page to see anything. So that's going to be the next step, is making it automatically pop in there when this works successfully. To do that, I'm actually going to change this around a little bit. So this just returns an object. This resource thing, well here, let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to save this to a variable called destination. And then I'm going to do return destination. This does the exact same thing. It's a different way of doing the exact same thing. Before I just had return destination. Well, now I'm saving it to a variable first. So nothing exciting there. It's still just returning it. I'm just saving it to a variable first. The reason I'm saving it to a variable first is because now I can like dangle additional things onto this destination object. So I can say like destination.sanjay equals cool. And now down here I can say console.log destination.sanjay, and it should print out cool every time I click on this thing. So there's that. So you can like add additional things. It's sort of like a class method, and basically putting a class method on here. It's like how in Rails you have class methods like .all. In fact, that's exactly what I'm going for here. Is I would like to have destination.all. I don't really want to use destination.query more than I have to, because every time I use it, that's going to be a new call to the database, and I don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do is when this page first loads, it's going to query the database, and then I'm going to kick the chair, and then after that, I'm going to push this new destination I've created into destination.all. In fact, I'll just call this new destination. And now I need to change this from being destination.query to destination.all. I hear someone going, phew, so yes, I know, I'll stop in just a second. So now I think when I do this, it's going to smush everything onto destination.all. I should see test2 pop up, and I do. And there it is. And it's still there, so this is good. And so the reason I did it that way is because if I didn't, then what I would need to do is I would need to do like destination.query in here. If I want to get this list of destinations to refresh, I would need to do something like this. And that's like a whole new AJAX request. And that's just like not super efficient. So doing it this way, I can do it all in one AJAX request. I only need to run this .query thing once. It's going to run .query at the very start when the app first loads, and then I don't need to run it again. So that's why I'm doing it this way. And I'm pretty proud of that, so I'm just going to add another test on here. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Anyone's mind melting yet?
Question.
Yeah.
The .query, is that an Angular thing or a JavaScript thing?
It's an Angular thing.
Okay.
So .query loads the index JSON. It's Angular's way of loading the index JSON. Yep. So again, without this, I would need to do like destination.query again down here, and that would just be an extra AJAX request. I don't want to do that because that's not very performant. This way, I can avoid all that. I only do it once. Jeff?
This seems like when you create a destination.all, that you loaded the JSON, basically all the contents of the JSON file into that variable, and then it modified that variable. But this doesn't seem like one of the cases where that should modify the JSON file itself. Are they at least pointing at the same thing?
So it's not modifying the JSON file itself. There are actually two things going on down here. So when I save this destination.save, it's not going to do anything to destination.all. This is like a one-way thing. Destination.save just sends some data to the database. Destination.save by itself does not update the data I'm storing in JavaScript right now. All it's doing is just telling Rails to add something to the database. If I do want to actually change how things look on my end, I need an additional step for that. So that's what this is doing right here. Destination.all, that's like my representation of all of this data. So first I'm updating Rails data, and then I'm updating my representation of the data. And I'm doing it inside a callback function.
Like
Kind
to
of.
the database.
Yeah, so I'm sending some data to the database. When I get a message that that data was successfully saved, I'm going to add this new destination I created into my collection of destinations on my front end. So there are really two collections of destinations here. There's one on the back end and one on the front end. I'm using this to keep them looking sort of the same. All right.
So I think it's been misspelled in the function when you're passing the destination.
Oh,
How did this-
because I did destination?
Yeah.
Oh, because I happened to misspell it the exact same way twice. Yeah, that freaked me out for a second. Yeah, if I had misspelled it only once, then this would not be working. Yeah, I was like, oh God, is Angular doing something I don't know about? Yeah, Jeff.
How did these the guest form function have access to destination.all function?
So it's because it's getting this destination factory is being injected into it. Yep. And so anything I dangle onto destination here, that's going to be available everywhere else there is destination. So this is why I mentioned before, like you need a factory when you want to have data be consistent between different views. That's what I'm doing right here. Cool. All right. So now I can create data, so that is awesome. The next thing is going to be the show controller and view. There we go. Okay, so I had the index working just fine. Now I'm going to get show working. So I know I'm going to be doing something with a show controller, so I'm going to add that on here. Controller show CTRL. And then this is also going to take destination, just like everything else. Excuse me. So I'm going to put in this state params thing. This is like, notice the params here. This is basically like params in Rails. You don't automatically get it though. You need to inject it in here. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm giving it access to the params that are inside. God, my voice is starting to crack. Sorry, guys. And giving it access to the params that are inside my URL with that state params thing. Now I'm going to go down here and actually define this controller. I think that's what I called it. And I injected into it, what was that? Destination and state params. Okay. And I'm just going to start with console log yo, just to make sure that is working. Well, no, that's stupid. I'm going to do var show VM equals this, and then show VM dot foo equals bar. I'll just start off with that. Now I need to tell my show state to use that. I also need to tell it what template to use. That's one more thing I'm going to need to do. May as well just do that right now. GPUs, destinations, show HTML, controller, show CTRL, controller as, show VM. Okay. I think that's all I need to do. Now I should be able to go in here and do something like show vm.foo and I'll see bar. Let's find out. So if I click on this, hopefully I see bar. Yes, I see bar. Cool, so now I have the show controller hooked up to the show view and all that's fine. This is good. Now all I need to do is just get the appropriate data in there. So to get the appropriate data, I need to get the destination that I want to work with here. So this is going to look kind of weird, and I'm going to explain what I'm doing in just a second. So this .all.promise thing, this is telling Angular to make sure it waits until this query has finished before doing what I'm about to do. I'm going to loop through all of these destinations I have in here, and I'm going to try to find the appropriate one. Okay, so now I'm going to check if the ID that was passed in the URL is equal to the ID of whatever destination I'm looking at right now. Then I'm going to make that one be the destination that is showing up in this page. So first I'm going to show that it worked, and then I'm going to explain what's going on there. Yes. Okay, cool. So when I do .query, that's an asynchronous thing. It takes some time to load it from the database, and so it's asynchronous. If I didn't have this $promise thing in here, then this would not work. In fact, I'll get rid of it right now. And now I think I'm just going to get a whole lot of nothing. And so that's because Angular is trying to loop through destination.all before that query is finished. It's doing all of this stuff really fast, so it's trying to loop through all of my destinations before it's even finished getting them back from the database. So this destination.all.promise thing, this is telling it, hold up, make sure this is actually loaded before you start trying to loop through it. So this promise thing is telling it, wait until all this stuff is actually loaded before you start trying to do things with that data. And that works fine. So there that is. All right.
How do they give these weird names?
So promise is actually a standard JavaScript thing. It's called like this $promise isn't built into JavaScript, but the name is a convention. It's called a promise because it's like saying, hey, I promise that when this request is done, I'm going to do something. I'm not really sure what better word they could have used. Maybe like IOU or something.
Oh, wait.
Oh. Yeah, that would be much better. Well, shit. Unfortunately, it's called a promise. So yeah, you're going to see promises referred to a pretty decent amount when you look in Ajax stuff. Ajax is all about promises. Every time you do a callback function, you're using a promise, even if you don't know it. A promise isn't like a thing, it's just sort of like a concept. What? In life, not really in JavaScript. Yes?
So is it always promise that then, or are there other things as well?
Yeah, there are other promise methods. I don't remember what they are, so I'm not going to get into it right now. There are other promise things. I think one of them is like in Ajax, you have like .success and like .fail or .error or something. I'm pretty sure this $promise thing has that as well. But I don't want to get into that. I'm just going to stick with then.
Does promise have to come after the query?
Yes. So remember that this .all thing, this is actually .query. And so it has to come after that. Okay, so the next step is to, oh, is that it? Oh, cool, good for me. Well, I may as well make the rest of this stuff show up. Show VM destination, I know, I'll fix it. There. Hopefully I still see Atlantis sitting pretty on here. Yep, there it is. All right. Cool, that's still there as well. Okay, so the next step, I think I'm done with this one. The next and last step is to add an edit on here. So I'm going to add an edit form. So I know that I'm going to be doing that with that destination form thing. So I'm going to do div data destination form. And then I need to pass in the destination that I want to edit. So I'm going to pass that in. Show vm.destination. And that should be all I need to do to see it showing up down here at the bottom. Oops. Let's look at Eldorado. There it is. Cool. So there is my editing form right there. It doesn't do anything yet, but it will. Let's see, what would the next step be? So I need, in here I have a create method. Obviously I don't want to create something right now, I want to update something. So I'm going to call this scope.update equals function. And then whenever someone clicks on that, I'm going to do destination.update. And then I'll do this thing, scope.destination.id, so it knows which one to update. Pass in scope.destination, that's all the data that I actually want to send. And then I'm going to end with this callback function, which is going to execute when this thing is done. Okay, so now I'm going to create this update button. And let's see how this goes. That one's all pretty, so I'll change this one instead. Foo bar. Let's see what happens. All right, I don't see very much. What if I refresh the page? Okay, so I see foo bar is there, so this worked. That was a lot easier than I expected, actually. Foo bar, yes, it really worked. Update. Awesome. Okay, cool. And so that was really easy, actually. I just had to put in this new update thing. Just to give myself some visual feedback, I'm going to do something like console.log success. Update. Oh, if I refresh this page and it's still there, yes. Yep.
So these functions for like creating a new one, updating, I've seen that in the function, not the name, but like the function call, like $update or $create.
Yeah, so there are two different ways to update something in ng resource. There's an instance method called $update. There's also this class method called .update. I prefer the class method because the instance methods, I don't know, I feel like they're kind of weird. Like, you would do something like, not that the rest of it isn't weird, but you would do something like $update, and then sometimes you like still need to pass the ID in anyway, and I'm like, well, that's stupid. Why would I do that? I may as well just use like the uppercase one. So I prefer to just use the uppercase one just because it's consistent everywhere. I have very few $signs on here. I don't really like to use those $sign methods just because I always feel like I'm going to mess something up. I'm not. That's like totally a stupid thing to think, but whatever. Maybe it's just because I like $signs in real life, but I don't like $signs in my code. I don't know. Yeah, I am done. So my next step, and actually what I have in here, is I have it set up so that the create button only shows up when you want to create it, and the update button only shows up when you update it. So that's something I could do next, but I'm not going to worry about that for right now. So the next thing on the agenda is to introduce the lab. So what do you want to talk about before I do that? Well, what I want to talk about is like the reason I did this morning instead of just answering questions is because the lab is like basically the same thing as this. And I also want to show that like I know there are lots of steps in here, but there are far fewer files. And so Angular doesn't have to be, that huge, ridiculous number of files like you had in Grumbler. My hope with this was to like maybe unsuck or unscary Angular a little bit. I don't know if I was successful, and don't tell me. But hopefully to like make it look a bit simpler than it was before. It doesn't have to be like this crazy collection of files. And in fact, you can do really neat stuff with Angular. I mean, like inventory tracker on Friday. Sure, it didn't save any stuff to the database, but you could sort and filter and do all sorts of cool things with that without worrying about all of this back-end code. So don't let Angular freak you out.
Can you scroll down? So the destination form function, when you have all those functions under the link, is that instead of having like new controller?
Well, this isn't in a controller anymore. This is a different thing. If it was...
But it works the same way?
Yeah, the only difference is that instead of attaching things to this, I'm attaching things to scope. Aside from that, it's the same concept. So like in a controller, you sort of dangle everything onto this. Index VM is equal to this, and then I tack stuff onto index VM. In a custom directive, you don't use this, you use scope. But if you want things to show up in the view, you still just attach them onto something. Scope is like the go-between between the custom directive, between JavaScript and your view.
Could you announce on Slack when this screencast is ready to roll?
Yeah, I will. Ken?
So I'm not running this method. I got the card running, but I tried to move the edit functionality from the main page onto the show page, and it broke everything. So something for some
Yeah. That is something I would recommend for today on the lab is and this is what I do in all my JavaScript. I start off with just one file. Excuse me. And then when I notice myself having to scroll around a lot and I'm getting tired of that, then I'll move things out into other files. But I like to start with just one file. I mean, to each his own. You can start with multiple files if you want. Like when you start up Rails, it gives you 8 million files to begin with. But I like to start off with just one. And then I create new files as necessary. All right, cool. Should I introduce the lab? All right, so the lab is WDI Radio Lab. It has nothing to do with NPR, contrary to all sounds. WDI Radio. Oh, damn it. WDI Radio. There it is. Okay, and so it's a lot like Tuner, except what you're going to be doing here is with songs. So for your project, you're going to be working in groups. For today, it's up to you whether or not you work in a group. I would encourage you to do so just to start getting used to that idea. We're not going to tell you what groups you have for your project yet. We'll tell that to you tomorrow. But I'm not going to come bringing down anyone's neck if you're not working in a group. It's just, especially if you're uncomfortable with the idea, I would encourage you to do so because you're going to have to get comfortable with it sometime. So it'll either be tomorrow or today. So it may as well be today. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. What?
What's it supposed to do?
Say what?
What's it supposed to do?
Yeah, good question. I don't remember. So the original version, it was something where it loaded songs from Spotify, I think, and you could actually play them, which was really cool. Then Spotify changed their API. So now, unfortunately, you cannot play the songs, which is really too bad. Yeah, I know. So for right now, it's just a single model CRUD app that doesn't use an API. It's just a way of storing songs.
So are we using the data already created, or are we using our own data?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It is using an API. Sorry, I lied. But it's not using Spotify. It's using one that you're going to be running on your own computer. So it's just like with Grumbler. You had Grumbler Rails API running in one place. You're going to have WDI Radio API running on your computer, and then you're going to make an Angular app that talks to it. Yep. So we provided all the songs for you.
So just set up push the Angular part in the controller for JSON. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you shouldn't need to do anything. You shouldn't need to change WDI Radio API at all. That's already set up. You should be able to just do dictmiss, start it up, leave it alone. Everything you're doing is going to be just Angular stuff. You shouldn't need to worry about the Rails stuff.
Is there an example of what it's supposed to look like or what it's supposed to do? Or?
Yeah, there's the solution. Oh, and hey, look, there's a deployed version. That's nice. Yeah. Wow, that's great. No songs.
The API isn't up, right? Or is it?
I don't know, actually. Oh, that's really tacky. Whatever. Feel free to change the CSS if you want. No qualms about that.
Getting this ask a question.
What?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you already have, but you may ask another.
You needed it for now.
Okay. Anything else? All right, as always, we'll be on office hours. Feel free to hunt us down. I am not going to be in office hours, but I will be watching Slack very carefully. So feel free to Slack things out, especially if things start to get backed up at the office hours tables.